when you were at school at Brown and they had a class on ESPN, would you have signed up for that class?
Of course, it's hypothetical because ESPN hadn't started till '79, and I was at Brown in the mid-'70s. Would I have? Sure, I would have. I mean, because I wanted to do this for a living, and sure, I would have.
You were there from so kind of we're going through the history of ESPN. You were there from the beginning, 1979, right?
Yes. Yep. I am.
How did
Do I look that old?
No, neither. We age very well. But how did you get to ESPN, and what was kind of the circumstances that you went to this new sports network that no one even heard about?
I'll do it quick. Ed, graduated Brown May '77. Got a radio job in Rhode Island, doing everything but sports. Maybe spinning tunes, reading the news, etc. You just do what you can. Westerly, Rhode Island. 1 year Waterbury, Connecticut radio, among which was a sports talk show, unheard of in the late '70s. Maybe the second one in the state of Connecticut. You didn't have that. It's not like now. While I was there, got the weekend job in Hartford on TV at the NBC affiliate, $23 a show. You heard me correctly. $23 minimum, after minimum. It was only a Saturday, Sunday night, so I kept my radio job. But while I was on those 3 months, ESPN was kind of starting and said, instead of sending you a tape, I'm 24 years old, why don't you just tune in and watch? Because then you can see even when I screw up. And for some reason, I impressed them enough that they said, would you like to be the late guy? Like the guy at 2:30 or 3 in the morning to say, sayonara, aloha, we're going off the air. And to do a little 10, 15-minute show, good night show that'll be midnight on the West Coast. I said, where do I sign up? And so I began 1 month in, Ed. So
1 month in. So
yeah.
why did that job why was that job attractive to you? Because nobody knew what the
No. Here's
what
the
did you
thing.
think when you heard of an all sports network?
Well,
everyone kind of was like, "What's this? Crazy."
Well, but again, the students here, you remember, but the students, you guys got to remember, cable. We didn't have 1,000 stations. As a matter of fact, we had like 5, and we had no. I'm going to date myself also. VHS. You had no way to record things. So if you were asleep out, you couldn't. There was no need to have more than 5 or 6 stations. Cable TV, they're going to have 36 stations. What? What do I need that for? So it wasn't even sports all the time who's going to watch. It's who can watch Channel 30, let's just say, when we only can watch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But here's what I knew pretty quickly. That it was on whenever someone might have gotten out of work. I'm working in a restaurant. I get off at midnight. There's something on. It's not the Super Bowl. It might be, oh my goodness, some of the things we used to have on. But it was legitimate sports, and it was SportsCenter giving you the scores. Remember, there was no sports radio. There was nothing, no internet. You got the scores way ahead of we were tomorrow's paper. So for me, to backtrack, you don't want it that long, but then again, I could stretch anything out. At 24, it was a no risk. I didn't have a family. I wasn't leaving the #1 sports job at Hartford with a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Right.
Boy, this may not work, then what? If it didn't work, I was on every night, which is an unbelievable experience. And at 26, I would have had a hell of a lot of experience. So a no-brainer at 24. At 34 with a young family, might have never made the move.
Did you think that there was what did you think when you even heard about this? Did you think this is the greatest thing, or are they crazy? Because a lot of people they're crazy. It's never going to work. And from, we know from history, it almost didn't work because of the money. The money that,
I thought that after being there a year or two, that these events that we have on are legitimate events. Now, I may not be an auto racing fan from the Northeast, but we had auto racing, and that's a lot of fans. We had college basketball on a Tuesday night. Everybody thinks that there's 5 games on a night. Not true. There would only be a Saturday afternoon game, maybe. So if you wanted to see Louisville and Darrell Griffith play on a Tuesday night, well, we had the Metro. So there was stuff on, and between that, there's the CFL, and we fell in love with Australian rules football, which is a whole other story. My point is, there's stuff. There wasn't 1,000 channels. It was stuff. And SportsCenter was results of baseball games on an every night basis, for example, throughout America. So nobody else had it. SportsCenter was a half an hour ad. How are you going to do a half an hour? Walter Cronkite does the evening news for only half an hour. Well, it's sports. It's okay. And you know what? It was a pretty decent product. But how fast would cable TV grow? It wasn't for me to predict. But a year or two in, I thought, there's a market for this.
One of the events that put this network on the map was the NFL draft.
Yes.
Again, who wants to cover, even the NFL was like, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to air the NFL draft? And I remember there was a quote, I think it was Chet Simmons who said, it didn't matter, we had to get something associated with the NFL. You were there.
Almost every draft.
Almost every draft. How important was the NFL draft in establishing the network, and what was it like, doing the early days of that, covering it?
Well, we were never going to get the NFL, although who knew that we started in 1979 and we got, in 1987, we had a package for football starting in addition to NFL Primetime, which was a highlight show, in addition to Sunday NFL Game Day, which became Countdown. 8 years in, we never would have predicted it, but the draft was one day. It was Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Central. They used to go forever. They used to do the whole thing, and we were on for like 12 hours. Pete Rozelle, the commissioner at the time, said, it'd be like reading the phone book. That's okay, we're doing it live. So we put it on, and it was pretty rudimentary TV, but the beauty was not that many people got cable at the time, so you could call in sick, people did on a Tuesday, and your boss living in the next town wouldn't understand, well, what do you mean there's a draft on TV? No one could figure out why Tuesday in April, it's not really a beach day. And it was one of those things that, whoa, there's some interest in this thing. And so you're right. NFL, okay, bigger picture, in no particular order. NFL draft, college basketball, to a degree auto racing in parts of the country, SportsCenter. Those are kind of, you could trace those all the way back to, those are shows I kind of, if I'm around, will watch. And that helped put a stake in the ground.
I mean, you mentioned college basketball. This is an amazing thing that I'm sure amazed the students. But in the early days, the 80s, the networks, CBS, they were not interested in the NCAA, the early round games of the NCAA tournament.
We invented it.
I mean, this idea, they no, let ESPN have it. Nobody's going to watch their
Nobody
early round
had
games.
it. Nobody had it. If Illinois was in it, let's just say the first round, you might have had a local outfit do their game against whoever it was here in Chicago and in Champaign. That's it. But nobody else would see that. And we did all the first round games, a lot of them on tape. What are we going to put on at 4 a.m.? Well, we'll put on Hawaii against. So March Madness started with us.
And then the networks realized what they had.
Even the round of 16 wasn't really on.
Right.
No one knows that. So we kind of brought college basketball up, and look what it is today.
You mentioned SportsCenter, and you were very instrumental in developing that SportsCenter. And back then, and again, the sports was, you read the scores, it was very stiff, there wasn't a lot of animation, and it was very straight. And you guys how did that reinventing SportsCenter and kind of being a little irreverent, having fun, and you start with the nicknames, and that became kind of your trademarks how did that start? I mean, was that a conscious effort? Was that something that that developed, that you did?
Well, here's basically, it's Tuesday night, it's 2:30 a.m., I'm sitting with the late Tommy Mees, and we had a gas. And remember, again, you can't remember, you guys are too young. Tuesday night, games weren't on TV. I know that seems amazing, but okay, we're in Connecticut. We could get the Yankees, we could get the Mets, we could get the Red Sox over the air, and a couple of, I'm just saying Tuesday night, for example, couple of games might be on Tuesday night, maybe the Cardinals, Other than that, it was Kansas City 5, Seattle 2. And here it is on your, and so how did we, we can't just put that up there for 1 minute. Let's do something with it. Well, okay, George Brett had 3 doubles, blah, blah, blah. But then you know, and playing for the Mariners was second baseman Julio. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Had the winning RBI. So, yeah, but we're just having fun with it. It was never never calculated to. I can be famous if they start quoting my funny stuff. Nah. Nicknames in baseball go back long before us. Right. Babe Ruth. I actually had a young person once said that was his favorite nickname that I ever came up with, Babe Ruth. I said, I thank you, but I can't take credit for that one. It's a good candy bar, though. So we didn't have pictures. If the planes landed in Hartford, we had yesterday's news. I'm going way back, but it's a half an hour of sports, so let's talk about it. Or maybe we put Ed Sherman's picture over here. He had 3 homers, but I don't have video of him hitting 3 homers. I'm going to talk about it, and then we're going to put up Cubs 8, you know, the Pirates 3, and talk about it. So it was kind of trench warfare, really, on the air, but it was just sports. It's okay, you know.
But it did kind of reinvent this culture of this brand of SportsCenter that it was going to be, that even if you weren't maybe interested in the teams, you were going to kind of watch it because it was fun, because you guys made it fun. It would be entertaining. That you know, maybe you wanted to see what the White Sox did or the Blackhawks did, but if they weren't playing, you still wanted to watch because you wanted to see what the guys were saying.
Well, you would get that in Chicago. You would get that from your local guy with the White Sox or the Cubs or the Blackhawks or the Bulls or, you know, obviously the Bears or Sunday. You would get that. And if you lived in St. Louis, you would get how the Cardinals did and your local highlights. But you wouldn't get Mariners Royals. And if you're a baseball fan, which they're at the time, you know, you didn't get any of that other than the box score in your paper tomorrow, and you might forget to look up the Royals, who were a good team at that time with George Brett. I keep bringing them up because they're champs now, but you wouldn't think of them as a national. So this was a way to follow sports on a national level. You would get the Chicago teams. New York would get the New York teams, but they wouldn't get the Cubs, you know? So we were talking to a national audience with people in all 50 states, and I knew they were watching. But they were interested in the other teams. It was fun.
Okay, so we had
a little time.
10 to 2.
Go for it.
Okay. So, again, I've talked to guys like George Bodenheimer, the president, who was also one of the almost originals, Chuck Pagano, you know.
These are great people.
Great tech guy. And they all kind of talked about the culture of innovation at ESPN, that this was a company that was, especially back then, they weren't afraid to take risks, and they weren't afraid to try things that were different, and if they didn't work, well, we'll go on to the next thing. I mean, it seemed like that kind of was how the company was built. This was a company that was very, we're going to try it, and if it doesn't work, we're going to go on to something else. Is that the way you remember it?
Yeah, and the batting average wasn't really 1 for 20. I mean, we couldn't get Major League Baseball or NFL or certain things, but the batting average was, yeah, let's try it, and even if it's okay, we'll go for it. You know, it's not about me, but in my case, Chet Simmons, one of the early presidents, you know, well, Chris Berman, he does some stuff, you know, 2:33 in the morning, a little different. Not that I was putting a pie on my face or anything like that. And he never admitted it till later on in his life. He's gone now, but I knew it. So leave him alone. He's doing fine. Now,
someone else might have come in and said,
of course,
no, right,
but it's not like I only give you that personal
but
story.
That was kind of like, but that's a good
But it was
example.
the same in advertising. It was the same in trying to sell our brand to cable companies. It was, I don't know what kind of deals they had to make, this, that, the other thing. It was technically, not that we're trying to land man on Mars, but things are coming. Try and be ahead of it a little bit so when it arrives for everybody else, we've thought it through. I gotta say, we had very good vision in many things. Not only what are we doing tonight or tomorrow, not only what are we doing next year, but maybe 3 years out. What do you think? Now that's a little bit farther along. But I thought that our vision, Ed, was, and it wasn't me. I mean, we had some smart. Nobody predicts the future that well, but we kind of had some hunches that we were ready when it was ready. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And I'm forever indebted to the thinkers who could see 5 years out. Some of us can't even see out of our garage, you know?
Did you ever think in 36, 37 years later that you'd be in one place all this time and that this company would be the largest sports network in the world, the most successful network in the world? I mean, you just look and you look at all the different things, entities that it has. I mean, you couldn't have imagined anything.
No.
Why has it been so successful all these years? What has been the driver?
Well, look, we wouldn't be so successful if sports wasn't at this incline if you're drawing a plot graph. We wouldn't be so successful in the beginning if cable didn't go like this rather than this. But it seems like, so bigger picture, which is more to the students where you are now, or maybe where you were at 10 years old, each time, and you've lived it too, Ed, you know, we're kind of reaching the ceiling in how interested people are and how many people are interested in sports, and it keeps going higher. When ESPN was one station to 1993. ESPN 2, is that going to make it? Well, do we have enough programming for 2/3 legitimate and the rest, you know, peanut butter and jelly? Yeah. So it seems that, and we're lucky, we'd like to, you know, we think we've done a good job, but the insatiability, if that's a word, of the sports fan, the thirst is not quenched yet. Now, if and when that happens, then we'll really know global warming is taking over. I think, Ed, that's really, we've been lucky that we got in a car that the tank of gas is always full. Is that okay?
But you guys knew, but someone had the vision to kind of get in that car.
Yeah.
And someone, and that, there was the power of that idea, which I always say, really kind of got you through those early years when the money was tight and when you had some characters running the company, but the power of the idea was so strong.
Well, here's the thing. So let's say again, we have to go back a way. You have to remember, guys and girls, no internet. So if you're from Illinois and you travel to wherever, it doesn't matter, you go to New Orleans, well, you wouldn't mind reading the Chicago Tribune or listening to the Cubs game or the White Sox, whatever, on the radio station down there. Well, satellite radio, this stuff wasn't available, but ESPN became a station, as CNN did, okay? We were 79, they were 80. Wherever you traveled, the country started to shrink in that we became a hometown station for you, not to replace your Chicago media, but maybe you had two, but now you're in New York and you still get ESPN, whereas you're reading the New York Times and you don't know that paper, or you don't know their sportscasters. So we were travelers with everyone as America in the 80s and 90s got smaller. So, you know, we were almost the forerunner of the internet a little bit, if you think about it in that way. I know that's hard to imagine.
Yeah.